Dear learners, welcome you all to e-learning platform. We are in week 11 now. Me, Faisal Ahmed, with you throughout this lecture. This week, you will learn 3 lessons. In lesson 1, comparison and contrast among the works of Joseph Conrad, E.M. Forster, and D.H. Lawrence. In lesson 2, you will learn the comparison and contrast among the protagonists of the 3 texts. The 3 texts are Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, E.M. Forster's The Passage to India, and D.H. Lawrence, The Rainbow. And in lesson 3, we will learn the comparison and contrast of the context of the 3 texts. Let's begin. Lesson 1. Comparing and contrasting among the works of Conrad, Forster, and Lawrence. Joseph Conrad is a post-colonial writer. With regard to his thematic preoccupations and literary styles, Conrad can certainly be considered a modernist writer. However, Conrad's work can be more suitably inserted into the genre of post-colonial writing, though like many authors, it is more likely that he shifts between two, if not more retrospectively imposed themes. Conrad's most famous novel, The Heart of Darkness, published in 1899, has been taken up and rewritten by several now canonical post-colonial authors, such as Nigerian author Chinua Achebe in his Things Fall Apart, 1958, and Kenyan author Ngugi wa Thiong'o in his The River Between, 1965. These are post-colonial literature. It is a testament to the post-colonial nature of Conrad's fiction. This is the Congo rivers. Here the picture is for illustrative purpose only. Post-colonial Forster. Following his third and final visit to India, during the last 3 months of 1945, Forster reflected on the increasing politicization he had found among the educated class of a country which was on the brink of winning independence from Britain. If A Passage to India is the great anti-colonial statement in English fiction of the first half of the 20th century, and Forster the great debunker of imperial pomposity, then we can gain a stronger sense of his unfolding relationship with India, of which the novel records only a fragment by paying attention to some of his other utterances on India. Lawrence as a modernist. There is no doubt that David Herbert Lawrence is the icon of the period of modernism in British as well as the world literature. It is Lawrence who gave directions how to cope with the difficulties of modern era. The growth of an individual into mature selfhood is a primary basis of the Lawrencean relationship. Lawrence describes a mystical kind of rebirth of the self into a deeper level of the unconscious. According to Lawrence, the journey into the unconscious is to be accomplished through sensual experiences. He mistrusts the intellect because he feels that the mind distorts reality. The bodily sensations are more concrete and therefore more real. Lesson 2. Comparing and contrasting among the protagonists of the 3 texts. The protagonist of Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness is Marlowe. The protagonist, Marlowe, is philosophical, independent-minded, and generally skeptical of those around him. He is also a master storyteller, eloquent and able to draw his listeners into his tale, although Marlowe shares many of his fellow Europeans' prejudices. He has seen enough of the world and has encouraged enough debased white men to make him skeptical of imperialism. Marlowe can also be read as an intermediary between the two extremes of Coates and the company. He is moderate enough to allow the reader to identify with him, yet open-minded enough to identify at least partially with either extreme. Belgian ivory trade in Congo and Marlowe as an observer. The image is for illustrative purposes. African slave workers in Congo. How Belgians established their colonies during the 19th century. The protagonist of E.M. Forster's A Passage to India is Dr. Aziz. Adela and Aziz are the primary actors in the central drama of A Passage to India, and they are antagonists to each other. But the novel isn't weighted in favor of one over the other. Instead, it attempts to give a candid account of both characters who seem to be carried away by forces beyond their control. Dr. Aziz's fictional character, a humble Muslim surgeon, a widower and a father of three in A Passage to India, published in 1944 by E.M. Forster. Aziz represents the native Indian community in conflict with the British ruling class. The central event of the novel is his trial for the alleged rape of a visiting English woman, Adela Quested. Here Dr. Aziz and Mrs. Moore are passing a chit-chat time. The protagonist of Lawrence's The Rainbow is Ursula. The novel The Rainbow is largely devoted to Will and Anna's oldest child, the school teacher Ursula, who stops short of marriage when she is unsatisfied by her love affair with the conventional soldier Anton Skrebensky. The appearance of Rainbow at the end of the novel is a sign of hope for Ursula, whose story is continued in Lawrence's second sequel, Women in Love. Lesson 3. Comparing and contrasting the context of the three texts. The context of Heart of Darkness. Conrad's works, Heart of Darkness in particular, provide a bridge between Victorian values and the ideals of modernism. Like their Victorian predecessors, these novels rely on traditional ideas of heroism, which are nevertheless under constant attack in a changing world and in places far from England. Imperialism is nevertheless at the center of Heart of Darkness. By the 1890s, most of the world's dark places had been placed at least nominally under European control, and the major European powers were stressed thin, trying to administer and protect massive, far-flung empires. Cracks are beginning to appear in the system. Riots, wars, and the wholesale abandonment of commercial enterprises all threaten the white men living in the distant corners of the empires. Belgian ivory trade in Congo. The context of A Passage to India. A Passage to India, published in 1924, was E.M. Forster's first novel in 14 years, and the last novel he wrote. subtle and rich in symbolism. The novel works on several levels. On the surface, it is about India, which at the time was a colonial possession of Britain, and about the relations between British and Indian people in that country. It is also about the necessity of friendship and about the difficulty of establishing friendship across cultural boundaries. On a more symbolic level, the novel also addresses questions of faith, both religious faith and faith in social conventions. Forster's narrative centers on Dr. Aziz, a young Indian physician whose attempt to establish friendships with several British characters has disastrous consequences. Miss Adela Quested. The context of the rainbow. In September 1915, 1 month after Methuen first published The Rainbow, Scotland yielded and confiscated more than 1,000 copies of it from the publisher and printer due to the obscene language in it. Later that year, the novel was successfully prosecuted for obscenity. Not only in 1924 was D.H. Lawrence able to find an American publisher for The Rainbow. Eventually, the work came to be considered one of Lawrence's finest, due especially to its intricate study of the tensions that often exist between men and women, covering the pre-World War I period from about 1840 to 1905. The novel explores the relationships between 3 generations in the Brangwen family, describing in the process the emergence of English society from the Victorian period and its entrance into the modern period. Lawrence shows how characters are determined in part by the time and place in which they live, and he also dramatizes how they struggle to reconcile conflicting feelings and impulses. Ursula and Mrs. English are teachers. They are in a close relationship, a sexual relationship in this novel, The Rainbow. There's the end of the lesson of week 11. Thank you very much for being with me. With more details next week. Talk to you. Bye bye.